this afternoon's briefing on WSCCO. Steve is joining me here, and I'm an apology for this in about 20 minutes, and Malcolm will take over chairing the meeting. Steve, do you want to start anything?
Yeah, thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mayor Sam. So the first briefing that we've got is around director appointments policy. This is in your briefing pack, and as I'm just loading that up.
Begins at page 6.
Yeah, the purpose of this is just to run you through the changes that we have made to the trustee and director appointment policy. We've done that for a number of reasons. Firstly, off the basis of the feedback that the current policy was out of date, and we weren't possibly following that to the way we should have, and I think that was the feedback that councillors gave us last month. We've looked at our existing policy, and then we've looked at a number of other current policies around our region and country to compare it, and because of the changes we've made, we have started with a clean, fresh start approach rather than a track changes approach. Julie's just going to run through some of the key changes in this policy, and then we're happy to take any questions or feedback from the councillors.
So I'll just run through a couple of key points. I won't look to speak through the entire policy. The policy, to Steve's point, has been drafted off the basis of other policies across the country, and has aligned with what council's current practice is. So it does, in terms of changes, it doesn't seek to change a lot in terms of what we do. So we would continue to run an appointments panel process, which has mixed representation of council, senior staff, and independent from our audit and risk committee, and the chair of the organisation that is being appointed to. That panel will have recommendation powers only. It has the ability to co-opt on extra people as needed or directed by council. And the final decision on any appointments or any remuneration would still come back to full council for decision making. The board members continue to be recommended for an appointment of 3 years, within still the same limit of 9, a total serving of 9 years on a board. So that is no change. What we have added in is a requirement for the council organisations to supply every triennium a copy of their skills matrix to this to the council for consideration. And what we have also added in line with that is drawing from best practice across other councils, looking at the types of skills that it is expected that all council organisations from Selwyn will have and will build their skill matrices around, noting that they will still have differences informed by their own organisational context. It does currently codify what is current council practice of not appointing councillors or council staff to boards of council organisations. And it acknowledges remuneration should be set at a fair market level, but it should be set at a level that acknowledges there is an element of public service to these roles. So that should be at mid or just below. And that should be based on an external independent recommendations, not from within. And the key here is the council retains the ability to approve or direct variations from this process if there are circumstances that arise which deem it appropriate, and that would come as a council decision in the usual process.
Thanks, Julie. Has anyone got any questions or comments on the new proposal? Lydia.
I had already brought this up with Julie, but it was just on page 2 around the wording of Canterbury Plains Water Trust. It's Central Plains, and we'll just get that incorporated into there. But my question's around the appointment panel, and so I just want to be clear on how I'm reading this. I'm reading it as an appointments panel will be set up at a triennial election, including a councillor, and that will be the appointments panel for that 3 years. Or should it be that a councillor is nominated to that appointments panel depending on the appointment? I'm just thinking about the different skills that people bring to the table and, you know, what different appointments you could be making for trustees or directors.
I'm happy to change the wording. The latter of what you've said was the intent. So I've obviously the words between establish and convening, I haven't made that clear enough. So I'm happy to add some words to make that clearer.
Okay, cool. And my other point is just around appointments. And I just wanted to understand, is there a stand-down period for elected members before being appointed to boards? So if an elected member wanted to apply for a board, do they have a certain amount of time they have to stand down for? And is that a conflict of interest?
So there's not, in the current, what we've drafted, a stand down period. What we have said is if you want to run for office, you have to stand down for the period of time that you've done that. At the moment, it would be managed through a conflict of interest. It would be a consideration of part of the appointment panel, but should that be the desire of the council to have that inserted into the policy before it comes back for decision, we can do that.
Yeah. Like, I just wonder, we have it one way, should we have it the other as well? Is there a period where we shouldn't be looking at and putting elected members onto boards?
I think it's
Happy to
an
discuss
interesting question to ask, and it might be a case-by-case thing, because depending on the board, there might be, and depending on the elected members at the time, this is only a policy that kind of works all the time, regardless of an independent council decision. So, yeah, happy to consider whether that is something that should be here. The current council practice is that we don't appoint councillors onto boards, onto our own boards. And for the WSCCO, as an example, legislation prevents us from doing that as well. So is there a particular occasion, or is there a... We'll come back to it. Okay, cool. Deborah.
My question is around on page 103, 205. Sorry, and I don't have a number. But it's around the appointments panel. And you've actually got basically appointments process. You've got interviewing and assessment of candidates. And you've actually got, may also consider factors such as chair and deputy chair succession planning. Should not that, why is it only, that I know the chair and the deputy chair was succession planning, but wouldn't you want to see the whole board succession planning with regards to the rollover for the 3 years? So you've got some sort of continuity beside just those two. So I'm just wondering whether it's the chairperson's or somebody, the chairperson's responsibility to understand what the succession planning model would look like.
It would usually be anticipated that the chair and the deputy chair should be managing their succession planning with council. The reasons that the chair and the deputy chair are called out is that those are criteria specifically which are different to other board members, that when their appointments panel is recruiting, it may want to look at particularly, does this person have a skill set that may lead them into being the chair as opposed to being a board member in general. But again, happy to consider if that's appropriate.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I think the intent here too is that it's not just defined or restricted to those two types of board appointments. It can be for any vacancy, and that's the intent of that approach.
Ooh, I'm up. Okay. Kia ora, I have several different questions and comments. I'll come back to the appointment panel, comments on the appointment panel, but moving through, there's when it comes to the appointment process, it talks about exiting, and I wondered if it would be helpful to have something in there that talks about some type of exit interviews, because I think that's really helpful for us to, as the people appointing, to understand whether or not it's been a successful appointment or not. The next one is, in terms of removal, So if it's a contested removal, whether or not there should be some form of policy to provide for independent review mechanism, but if our council policies are already sufficient to cover that off, then that's fine. I've just often seen some type of conflict resolution clause when it comes to a removal process. My next was, I was a little bit confused about why the treatment of community board members were eligible but not council or staff, because community board members are elected just like councillors are. So what's the difference there? And I won't turn that off because I've got more to go.
It was a position that's proposed by officers. It doesn't have to be accepted. So our thinking behind that one, and Steve might want to add to this, was it's a different level of conflict. So the role that community board members play, they have different access. They make different types of decisions. So the conflict that arises versus senior staff, for example, or councillors is not as substantial. So we thought that perhaps that it justified a different approach because they may also have valuable other skills. However, if that's not the position council wishes to take, that's no problem.
Yeah, just to add further to that, when we look at the current community board delegations, there aren't any decision making at the moment that would create the conflict unlike what is around this table. So there is whilst they're elected, the powers of decision making are fundamentally different, and so we felt that could be treated differently in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I don't have a strong preference either way, and that's clarified it for me, so thank you. The part that I wasn't quite sure about when it comes to having a skill matrix, I'm not sure if it goes far enough to encourage the capability and diversity that we've talked about previously. And the conversations that I've heard around this table when we've come to appointing directors has been the value in having different genders and ethnicities and sector expertise on the boards. And I just wonder if rather than just say we will have a skill matrix for each one, we want to identify in the policy. I mean, I would feel comfortable identifying in the policy that these are the things that matter to us, having diversity of thinking.
No problem. So we have diversity of thought as a consideration under the appointments section of the policy, but we can pull that into the eligibility for appointment.
Yeah.
So we haven't set the skill matrix specifically, but what we have said is the skills that cumulatively a board is expected to hold between them. It's page 3 of the policy and page 10.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see those diversity things transferred over into that as well. So it's quite clear when the appointment panel's writing up their skill matrix that they take those things into account. But keen to hear if that's important to everyone else. The next thing was I had a very similar question to Lydia, whereas I thought it was you're going to be making the appointment at the beginning of the term and then that's it. And my comment on that would have been I didn't think that would be appropriate because it wouldn't take into account the composition that would be required. So, and I think you've clarified that to say it's not going to be that, it's going to be considered on each appointment.
Yes, so the intent is that it's established and then the final 2 members being the chair of the relevant board and a councillor appointed by council would, at each time it's convened for an appointment or remuneration process would be decided in that moment. So I will make sure that comes through clearly in the next draft.
Great, and then my last question is whether or not the named roles on the appointment panel, like the chief executive, mayor, or the chair of the audit and risk, can appoint an alternate if they're unavailable, or does that decision come back to council? Because I would expect that they don't get to just appoint who they want as their alternate.
No, it should come back to council, and we can put a line in to note that as well.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with what Lydia said. As far as I'm aware, it's good practice to have a stand down for current councillors or slightly ex-current councillors and recent councillors in applying for the board role. I think I'd like to see that in there, to be honest. I feel like if you've just voted for something, you shouldn't then be able to apply for that role. A shadow board member. We did discuss that the other day. I haven't seen that in here, but Are we going to create an allowance for that part of working through having shadow board members on here so that we're, I'm trying to think of the terms, late in the day. Yeah, like an intern, so that we're creating space for bringing people on and part of our strategic thinking.
If I can answer that one, I think whilst we're dealing with appointments now, that might be more of a matter for the statement of expectations that are set on an annual basis for each of the boards.
Okay. Cool.
I guess in the terms of be careful what you wish for, I suppose, when you talk about requiring stand-down periods for ex-councillors, and I'm soon to be an ex-councillor, so I guess I declare a conflict of interest, but it's hard enough to get experienced governors to come to council already. If you put a block on their future aspirations by saying, well, actually, you're not even eligible for this after you leave, I think you might find it harder to get more people to stand for this role.
Thanks, Grant. And I guess, and it can also be covered by the decision that council makes at any one time in the search for who they want, whether or not it's covered by the policy. Sorry, Julie, you were going to say something else here?
But no, that my only clarification would be from the parties that are talking about stand down, what period are we talking about? Are we talking kind of a 6 month, 3 month, or are we talking 12 months to 3 years type stand down?
We'll come back to those that have got views on that then. I wonder with the appointments panel, I'm interested in why the chief executive is on the appointments panel, and we have had staff involved in appointment processes, but that has been sort of by exception rather than our normal process. So just keen to understand, is that normal everywhere, and we've been doing it abnormally, and how that plays into the decision making of governors, setting up governors somewhere else who are doing a role on council's behalf and having the chief executive involved in that decision?
So it's mixed bag. It's not an unusual position, but it's not a required position as well. The benefit of having the chief executive as one voice on a recommending body is the knowledge and the relationships the chief executive brings to that process. I think what we've tried to do is we haven't put any other staff members other than the chief executive in on the basis that it is simply to provide that voice and that knowledge to the panel, but not to sway the panel or over-influence the panel beyond one voice.
Because I can see for the water services, like it was quite key because it's very operational in the shift and change, needing to understand we've got people with the capabilities, but in appointing someone to any of the other CCOs that we have, there's just not that same level of connection. So just to have it as an always the CEO here, I'm interested. I mean, I don't mind it being there, but it just seems like we're giving away some of the elected responsibility we've been given as governors to our employee, who we do want their skills and we do want their expertise and knowledge. Is it on that panel? Yeah, okay. Lydia.
It was just on the, I guess, the stand-down period, and it's something that came to my mind when I was reading it, and I thought it was worth having a conversation around, and potentially it is something that could be managed through conflicts of interest. So I'm not going to die in a ditch over this. I thought it was just worth, having a conversation about it, and noting that there is a conflicts of interest in there to be managed, so it could fall in that, but
I think if we can take that away and consider whether or not a stand down period as an arbitrary measure, or whether or not we actually, through the panel decision making process that council has, whether or not you consider in the term of a 3 to 4 month period preceding that appointment, has there been any decisions related to that entity? We might deal with it through the conflict of interest that way. But I think we've got your guidance on this, and we'll go away and do some thinking and bring back an option around that.
And probably another piece to that is once you're not a councillor, you're absolutely not connected to council in any way. Like if it's central government, you've got 3 months transition, there's supported payments to help you exit from being an MP. When we are no longer standing for council or the community doesn't re-elect us, that next day you don't have that same connection to information or that same connection to the organisation. So, yeah, interesting just how those two things might be dealt with a little bit differently. Megan?
I just wanted to add into that point as well and share my views on that. So I support what both Grant and you've said, Sam, and that, but I add a couple more reasons as to why I support it. I think that it just assumes that there's a bias without any evidence, and that an ex-councillor cannot act independently or in the best interest of the CCO. And I think that undermines the principle of making a merits-based appointment. I also agree that they could have valuable knowledge or experience that would fundamentally improve the business. And I think there's already existing protections, and particularly if you're no longer a councillor, I can't see where the conflict exists.
I think it comes down to the skills matrix. You want the best person for the role on the board. We have been served very well in the past by people who were councillors when they were appointed. At that stage, it was our policy. You could be a councillor on a board, and they have served very well for us on boards. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it. I think it comes down to whether you're good enough to do the job, and as a board of director, you have to act in the best interests of the board you're appointed to.
Yeah. So flowing on from what I said before, stand down period for me. If there is a conflict of interest and a councillor has been involved in any way in any decisions shaping this entity, then there should be a stand down period for at least 3 to 5 years.
Okay. Any other views? Cool.
It's normally
Anything else on this appointment, on the overall policy? Deborah?
I was just going to say, I read somewhere, I think earlier on, that it was a 2-year stand down for another policy that we actually had for appointing board members.
Is that what you want, Deborah? So this conversation is setting up a new policy for us. What are you saying? You support a stand down period, or you'd like to just allow people to be chosen on merit?
I'd really like to consider a stand down period, to be honest. And I think I've read somewhere it's normally 2 years, but maybe 12 months. But I just prefer the stand down period. It just separates that governance role from where you've been, and it sort of it gives you an opportunity to break the governance ties from being a council governance over that period of time, instead of going straight from there maybe into a trust or a CCO, that's tied to the council. But I think I don't want to extend it any longer out, because the reason being is that quite often the governance knowledge that you actually get from sitting around this table, and if in your skill matrix it's important that the board consider local knowledge, well, then you really are going to have to consider the local knowledge aspect, and quite often that local knowledge will come from somebody that's been in the community or worked around this table. But I do like the idea of a stand down period, whether it's 12 months, 2 years, I don't know, but
Thank you.
I'm speaking in favour of it.
Are there any other views on that? I'm hearing there's two different views, but it's sounding like the majority is happy with a skills-based decision on the day. And so I also note that this decision is really, we're only setting this up for this one decision on a CCO, because the new council, after October, will review all policies, this being one of them, which will then set their direction after October this year anyway. So there's a chance for that to be reviewed then.
Can we have a show of hands on that?
No, this is just a workshop on it. We've heard the views of the room, and there's some for and fewer against. Steve?
Yeah, thanks. I think we've got the temperature of the room. We'll bring back an option. I guess one of the benefits of us doing a bit of a clean start on this is that we will look at a range of other councils and how they deal with this and how they have dealt with it. So what we'll do is we'll bring back a preferred option, but we'll let you know what else we've considered based on your feedback.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie. The next matter for the briefing is WSCCO. Operational Delivery Agreement, Transitional Services Agreement, and Working Capital Facility Agreement. Tim and Alex, welcome along. The floor's yours.
Thanks, Sam. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Alex. Alex is the Program Director who's been leading the establishment team. And I see Heather's joined us as well. Heather Geddes is a member of the PMO as well, working closely with Alex. And in a minute, I'll hand over to Alex to talk through at a high level the transitional documents. But before I do that, I just wanted to draw your attention to Appendices 1, the decision timeline. So today we're reviewing Block 2 establishment decisions and providing a briefing on the Operational Delivery Agreement, the Transitional Services Agreement, and the establishment of a working capital facility. The documents are intended to support the phased transition to the WISCO from the 1st of July to the 20th of December this year. So today we're just briefing with a final decision on these documents at the 18th of June Council meeting. And just before I hand over to Alex, we also committed to identifying any changes to the Appendix 1 decision timeline. The Water Service Delivery Plan has been moved from this briefing to the 18th of June Council meeting, with an extraordinary meeting scheduled for the 25th of June for adoption. And the reason for that is it's a significant document. It's around 170 pages. It's an important milestone in the establishment of the WISCO, and we want to give it due consideration and an opportunity for some robust discussion. So at this point, I'll hand over to Alex.
Nā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, e nā mana whenua tēnā koutou. E kunihera o Waikirikiri Selwyn a tēnā koutou. Ko Alex Cabrera te koingwa, e mihi ana ki nā tohu onehe o te waka o Aoraki e noho nei ahau. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. I had the pleasure to meet several of you before, so it's nice to reconnect. As Tim said, I would like to present to you the framework supporting the transitional activity. The document, or the three documents before you, three key instruments kind of laying out a careful structure pathway from 1st of July and beyond. They ensure that we meet council expectations while avoiding disruption to services, staff and community. I want to start by acknowledging that we have been listening very carefully. We have heard the conversations, the discussions, and believe that we have reflected your feedback across those three documents. We are to proceed with purpose, steady, but in a cautious manner as we build a new organization. We are taking prudent, cost-effective, and conscious approach, ensuring that we remain agile and responsive while laying out a strong foundation for Selwyn Water Limited. So this is fast, but certainly not furious. The Operating Delivery Agreement, the ODA, is the backbone of the services delivery during the transition from 1st July to December. Selwyn Water Limited will deliver drinking water and wastewater services on behalf of the council. It will ensure continuity while requiring the Selwyn Water Limited services at the same standard and at the same way as they have been delivered in the past 12 months. The document outlines clear responsibilities, performance expectations, reporting requirements to council, ensuring accountability and transparency, and I think that was, raised by many of you in the previous discussions. Importantly, also includes the setup of a working group to provide that ongoing oversight and coordination between the two organisations through that transition. The Transition Services Agreement, TSA, this agreement supports the ODA by detailing the services the Council will continue to provide to Selwyn Water Limited, such as HR, IT, customer services, property access, and so forth. It allows Selwyn Water Limited to function effectively while it gradually builds its internal capability. These services will deliver on a cost-neutral basis and with a clear, defined service level to ensure quality and the quality is maintained. The TSA enabled us to retain institutional knowledge and manage the risk while allowing Selwyn Water Limited to focus on establishing a long-term structure. The working capital facility, since Selwyn Water Limited won't have immediate access to income or lending, the facility provides an initial funding of up to 9 million. Just want to be clear, it's not 9 million, it's up to 9 million. It's structured as a repayable, cost-neutral lending through Council's existing arrangement with LGFA and or Westpac. This funding will cover direct costs, rent, insurance, just kind of business as usual activities, some of the cost of shared services, as well as some of the establishment costs through this transition. It avoids the need for external borrowing and protects ratepayers' interests, reflecting on our careful and prudent approach. Progress has been steady, as I said before. We are already seeing some benefits in terms of an improved collaboration, sharper focus, and a greater alignment within the team. I guess these are the, one of the benefits of having that kind of single focus, that mission with a kind of unlocking, I guess, a whole bunch of new benefits and clarity in delivering. At this point, if you don't mind, I just would like to acknowledge the work that the team has been doing. As I said, we got here Elaine and Thomas, who are part of the team and been doing a great job on developing this document, as well as Heather, that, as Dean mentioned, has been working across both teams to get us to this point. Heather, would you like to add anything?
No, I want to say a huge thank you to the legal team as well, though, in terms of moving this. So there's a lot of information in here in terms of bringing this together to three documents, that will allow us to take a measured approach to get to that fully operational position for the 20th of December. So thank you for your consideration.
So at this point, I guess I will just pause and take any questions.
If councillors, any questions? Deborah.
One question, and it's my diligent page 134 out of 205. You're talking about the initial acceptance of 5 water servicing certificate applications. Should it be 5 water or should it be 2 water? Why are you mentioning 5 when stormwater, water races and land drainage are not part of this program?
That's primarily because that activity hasn't been separated yet, so we're just trying to avoid any disruption to the community.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Do you want to move through the... Oh, Grant, you have a question.
Do you want to cover all questions in one go? Or?
We're going to move through the 3 documents, so
Okay.
We're here now, so if you have a question on the first document.
Well, I guess it's probably contextual for the 2 documents that are coming up. I suppose as a governor, we agreed to create a WISCO. I guess what we haven't agreed to or I don't understand yet is what form that may take. And it appears we're charging headlong into an all singing, all dancing model with a fully fledged staff, where I thought we might have been having a very small holding company and contracting back pieces to the council. As yet, unless I've missed it, I don't think we've had that discussion as to the efficiency. Have we actually paused and thought, what is the most efficient way to deliver this company rather than creating a behemoth and transferring staff all over? Should it be, right, hybrid, all those things? Have you given consideration to that? And the second point I was probably going to raise is the $9 million facility. I'd like to see some sort of cash flow forecast that supports it, rather than give us 9 million in working capital. Where's the cash flow forecast that supports that? It tells me, shows me. Thank you.
Should I respond to it? Yeah. So the first question is the approach that we've taken, as I said before, is very prudent. So there's a consultation starting tomorrow with the staff. They work across the drinking water and wastewater. So there's no other staff transferring. So it's just the kind of the bare minimal to start. And we are not establishing any other roles until we work through that process that you just described. So I think it is very much at a, build slowly as we learn and as we find the best ways of delivering or giving effect to the council decision. In terms of the working capital, as I said, it's up to 9 million. It's based on current costs plus some of the establishment activity, and we have those workings available. So, yeah, I don't think it's an issue to making those available to the council.
Just to add to that, Grant, in regard to your first question around the establishment of the WISCO, we have had many discussions around our intent to transition to a full WISCO by the end of this year. Originally, we were looking at establishing a full WISCO in July, and we made a decision here that it was more prudent to do that more slowly, which is why we're in a transitional arrangement at the moment with full establishment at the end of the year.
I guess if we start with the $9 million, it was along the same as Grant. I would have liked to have seen some cash flow forecast, and so my questions already sat around, where are we tracking with the $2 million? I know that had come back to a previous meeting here, but I guess it's just the management of this that I'd like to see, of saying, a $9 million working capital facility with no forecast or budget attached to it is a little bit alarming to me. So that's something that I would have liked to have seen there. If I can touch on the timelines, I see there's a few items that have dropped off from the Local Water Done Well subcommittee, and some of that was around directors' appointments. Are we recruiting for directors yet? Is that out? Because that's something I've sort of been asking for through that subcommittee, and I was told that would happen post-decision, but I sort of haven't seen any update on there. So I think it's good if we, through these updates, if we can still have the timelines that were associated through the Local Water Done Well subcommittee would be really good. I've got some on the operational delivery and transition services.
So we just answer those questions first and then, yeah.
So the first part, I'll start with the last part of your question. No, there's been no work on appointing directors because we were waiting for the appointments policy to be reviewed. So that was, I think, the feedback from the last discussion. So we're waiting. Once that policy is reviewed, then we can proceed with your new policy. In terms of the working capital, same point that I made to Grant is based on your current kind of business as usual cost for some activities. So we'll provide the detailed budget forecast in whichever way you normally receive that. So I will make sure that we get that to the council as soon as possible. But it is available, by the way.
We'll come to the transitional services when we deal with that paper. Is that all right? Cool. Grant.
It's taking a bit of getting used to these new microphones, isn't it? Thank you for your reply. I guess only just putting my opinion on the table. I wonder whether the slowly approach and building it as you fly it is a really strategic approach, because it seems to me you'd be better, the chairman or something, creating the vision of what the infrastructure is going to look like and testing it with the staff and actually creating it. This build it as you fly it doesn't sort of resonate with me as a really good strategy. It's not my decision, but it seems like a highly risky strategy to follow. And I just reiterate what Lydia was saying, I guess, around the expenditure. Well, inevitably, in a year's time, there'll be a council sitting around here saying, did we make the right decision around the WISCO or not? So there needs to be a collection of data which enables that, so the establishment cost versus the OPEX. So it's important we get the data right so that the future council has that opportunity.
Yeah, I might just jump in there on the first part of that question, Councillor Miller. I think we've also indicated today that we're bringing back the Water Services Delivery Plan, which is, I think, to exactly your first point, which is that is the strategic direction. These two documents you have in front of you today, the Transitional Services Agreement and the Operational Agreement, are the mechanisms by which we're going to give that effect. And we have taken on board the feedback from Council around really making sure we are making prudent, smart decisions. We aren't building a behemoth from day one. We are taking a really pragmatic approach to this. So there's a number of documents that are coming together within the next 2 to 3 weeks that will give that framework that Alex has touched on today. Alex.
Thank you. I just would like to add that we have been engaging with the Water Services Delivery team and have a number of workshops in terms of defining the values, how we want to be operating, what is the vision for the organization. So we are, people are working through that, and Elaine and the team have been participating in those discussions, which will give us those other elements in terms of the, building the full picture. And there's another reason why they're kind of going in a steady kind of, step by step. It's quite prudent, I think, at this stage.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I just wanted to note as well, and Alex has sort of touched on providing the breakdown on the working capital facility, but I think it is worth just noting that within the paper and diligent, that facility will be repaid in full to Selwyn District Council. I mean, obviously it will get consolidated back up at group level, but it's not, for want of a better choice of words, money that we're just giving away. It will be repaid in full.
And I've had conversations with the chair and with you, Alex, too, around making sure we can itemise the spend that would have happened in the new CCO if it was in-house, so that, I think you're right, Grant, in 12 months' time, might be sooner than that, people want to go, well, what are these costs are actually on top of what otherwise would have been there, so we've got to measure them from day one, and that's part of the plan. Alex, I don't know if you want to speak more to that.
No, I think that's been covered. But yeah, we're taking a very, I think, as I said before, we listen very carefully to the feedback that we receive from the council, and we're giving effect to that. Building slowly, but with purpose, and we have been using mainly the council staff to kind of build the organisation and getting everyone involved. So I think there is a good level of engagement across the team and a level of excitement that is quite noticeable. So feeling quite comfortable where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I was quite pleased to see this. I felt that it was well structured and consistent with the direction that we need to be going. It might be a little bit outside of the scope, but I know it takes quite a significant amount of time to be prepared for our next annual plan. Are you guys already addressing that into this timeline and part of the transitional aspect, having the resources to build into being prepared for the annual plan to really have more engagement and consultation with the community?
I don't know that it's me the best person to answer that question, but probably Alison may want to say something. One thing I can say is that we are working very closely to ensure that those documents like the Water Services Delivery Plan and the annual plan align well, and that don't create any disruptions or barriers to what the direction the council had already established as the direction of travel. Alison, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, Elizabeth, just to respond to your question, so what Alex and Thomas and the broader team have done is make sure that what we had set out in our long-term plan year 2 is in keeping with the annual plan, and certainly in the future they will be probably following a similar process that Selwyn will do for planning, and that would be set out in the letter of expectation as well.
Thank you. That's the Operational Delivery Plan Agreement. Shall we now move to the Transitional Services Agreement, and any share anything on that?
I think Alex has covered all of the documents at a reasonably high level, so I suppose we'd just ask if there's any questions on any of those documents at this point.
Cool. Lydia, you had a couple of questions on that?
Yep, I did. I just, with the working group that's listed in there, so is it a name that's going to go in there, or is it a position title that goes in there? More around my question on that one. And then schedule 1 of that, I don't know if I'm reading that correctly, but... Sorry,
Lydia, do you want to just keep your microphone on and we'll just answer that question?
Okay.
And then work through it? What's the answer to Lydia's first question there, guys?
We have established a transitional working group which has a number of key staff members. So we are using that title because the membership may change as based on the particular activity that we are covering. But the purpose of the group is to ensure that alignment exists and that we kind of grow and transition in a coordinated and well planned way.
Yep, that makes sense to me. And 9.3, I just wanted to understand why we might store data outside of New Zealand.
It's a pro forma provision in a contract, so it accounts for the fact that the majority of cloud servers are not based in New Zealand. They might be based in Sydney, San Francisco, and it just anticipates that when you're using cloud-based servers.
Cool. And just 5.1 on there, are you looking to move out of the Health Hub premises and into HQ?
Good question. We are looking at premises. As I said, we are building the CCO with the view of kind of serving the whole district. So although at the moment, majority of the staff are based here and makes sense to kind of have a presence here, but I think over time as the thinking, develops, it may be, well placed somewhere else in the district, closer to the community, so slightly more central. But obviously, Rolleston would always have a, quite a significant staff presence here. We have been looking at some facilities there at the moment that showing some underutilization to see if we can, use some of those to improve the utilization and also reduce the costs. Sorry, it's a long way of saying I'm not sure, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. It's good, thank you.
I was just looking at a customer consent clause, which sounded like it could be difficult if we had to ask all our customers to give consent to transfer from Selwyn District Council to Selwyn Water. Can't we do some sort of deed of covenant or something where we license that privacy requirements across to... Surely we don't have to go to each individual customer and ask for transfer?
Yeah, Grant, could you give us the clause number that you're looking at?
Clause 7.4 on page 128 of Diligent.
It's another pro forma. It's there if we require it. Our intention would be to do a scoop up, as would be usual during a transition process, and there are provisions under the Privacy Act that where you fall into merger and acquisition, you can just do transfer. So it's to the extent we're not captured under provision that permits us, we would look to
that. Question about when do you expect that the billing arrangements would transfer from Selwyn District Council to direct to Selwyn Water, I suppose, and you may not know the answer to that, but there's going to be that perception, or are we going to continue taking the income and taking the hits, I suppose?
I will probably ask some of my colleagues to comment, but we can't really do that until the assets have transfer, and I know that the asset transfer will be quite a complex matter, so that's why we want to again allow us enough time for the council to have enough involvement and a view on those. I mean, there will be some assets that will probably be relatively straightforward, but there would others that will require some work. So it's only at that point that we can then start looking at borrowing and any other revenue generation.
Thank you.
Just adding to what Alex has said there, so initially we will be billing through Selwyn District Council. Once we've got the assets transferred, we will work with our digital team to try and look at a carve out within Magic to make sure we've got the segregation of duty, but until such times we'll be billing through Magic, through SDC.
And on that billing, so we'll be doing the billing, but actually the invoice itself could separate out the water and have it as a Selwyn Water charge?
We can work with Magic to be clear on what language we use on the invoice. So it could be Selwyn District Council on behalf of XYZ, but we'll work with Magic to make sure we've got that very clear.
Cool, thank you. Deborah.
Sorry, I'll just bring it up on my diligence. It's not coming up. Look, my question's around Schedule 1. And once again, it is around the wording and the terminology that has actually been used. you've got provision of services, but then you've got assistance to disposal of surplus sites and or land. And I read the next one down, and I think that that should be extended to say that it is only over water-related land. And when we've got management of grazing and farming licences and leases, that also should have over water-related land. So it's quite clear for the reader of this document that your jurisdiction is only over water-related land, and not giving the impression for any other reader to say that, hang on a moment, how far is the WSCCO is actually going? It's clarity throughout the whole document, like the 5 waters versus the 3 waters. I know it's a transition, but it really needs to be quite clear what you're separating out in the terminology of the wording of the documents.
So really happy to take the feedback on board and add some extra concepts around that. And I think probably just the framing to put up around the ODA, the Operational Delivery Agreement, and the TSA are kind of mirror contracts. So what the scope of delivery of Selwyn Water is set under the ODA. The TSA is what services is Selwyn providing to help them do that. So if it's not in their scope under the ODA, it's not being provided for them under the TSA. But really happy to take the feedback on board around some clarity on wording.
Okay, that brings us to the Working Capital Facility Agreement. Questions, councillors? There's some discussion earlier on this. Elizabeth?
Page 160, there's a human resources transition services, provision of services. You've got talent management. Just wanted to clarify what that is, please.
As I was saying before, we are not kind of duplicating or creating new structures in the CCO, so that's just part of the services that we may require SDC to provide from time to time, and it will be about, kind of recruiting new resources, for example.
Thank you. Any further questions on that document? Or comments people would like to make? No? Thank you, Alex and Tim, for bringing that to us. How do we come? Oh, sorry, there is one before you go. Megan.
Sorry, yes, I have more comments on, because I didn't break mine down into absolutely everything per paper, so I had a number of kind of wrap-up stuff. So the first thing that I wasn't quite clear on, and I did read through all of them, but I still just at a high level wasn't quite sure, like in terms of governance and accountability or governance roles and responsibilities in the transition period, like what stays here with us from a governance lens perspective, and then what moves to the directors, just so that it's really clear to us what our responsibilities are other than director appointments during that transition period.
So I would think the way I would kind of characterise these agreements is to think of them in a similar way to how we contract with CORD. So CORD's board are responsible for delivery of that contract and the operations under that contract, but they are not responsible for the governance of water. So the governance of water and wastewater, the Territorial Authority, Selwyn District, remains that delivery. Under this model, until we do the asset transfer, essentially Selwyn Water becomes our service provider for doing that. So so they are responsible for ensuring good service provision, and the council remain responsible for full governance.
So we will remain responsible for all of the asset until it's fully transferred, including the insurance decisions and things like that.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. And in terms of setting the rates, like setting, that still sits with us?
Everything. That is not a service provision, sits with us.
Great, okay. My next question was, like how confident is the operational readiness to take over on the 1st of July, and is there any significant risks with the operational risks, and if so, how are they being mitigated?
I think the level of confidence is high. the framework that we had presented today, I think, provides some really good parameters to operate. And probably the most important thing from my perspective is the level of collaboration that exists across the team. So that kind of gives me, total confidence that they will be operational on the 1st of July.
Yeah, I know that's helpful. And I think knowing that it's a new entity and fresh, some of the legacy issues that we've talked about or called them legacy issues for a number of years, like the 20,000 cost codes and all of those types of things, won't be transferring across. So, but I wanted to know if those legacy issues were a operational risk for you starting on the 1st of July.
I'm sure there will be some risks, but I think that focus that we are seeing across the organisation into the two waters has provided us with some clarity and a clear pathway going forward. So that in itself kind of reduces some of those risks because now we are aware of what those are and how to approach them.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Because for those, so for any of us who are here in a year's time, it'll be really challenging to be hearing, well, that was a legacy issue that was already in place and didn't transfer properly, because we're hoping that, well, we're hearing now that that's not significant. There's a high level of confidence that this won't actually happen this time next year.
I mean, certainly we have identified some areas that, can be improved, but that is, I guess, what makes this activity, already start seeing some benefits in terms of, getting the clarity on the things that we need to address and how and the team have been reporting some good progress, just providing that kind of clear connection across areas like asset management and finance and operations and all that. So, so the level of confidence is high. It's not going to be perfect on the 1st of July, but, it's not having the clarity of what we need to do to deliver better outcomes. It's what kind of drives my assessment of the level of confidence.
What would be really helpful in those monthly service performance reports, I think they're monthly, is to know if there are any of those legacy challenges in transferring across. So because we're still sitting here as governors for this entity, so that way we can enable and empower the transition. So it would be good to have that in the reporting.
We are doing a number of kind of due diligence exercise across the board, from assets to people to services to all of that. So, I mean, I'm new to this, but I'm in your hands. If that's, helpful, there's no reason why we couldn't provide that. We're certainly doing that work now.
Right. I only have one last question that might be more for you, Tim. And that's, how are the staff being supported through their transition? So in particular in regards to employment certainty and staff morale.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, we've got a comprehensive consultation plan that's underway. It started this week, and we're alongside the staff. We've been speaking to them at length. We run a number of drop-in sessions so they can understand what the process is. And that's going back a number of weeks now. So they've been well informed. I think the PMO team have done a really good job at keeping them updated on direction that we're heading. And we're about to go into the consultation, as I said, this week. So they're well supported, I believe, and the communication has been good with staff.
Cool. Thank you for presenting that. I think just a couple of final things is for us to think about ahead of these papers will come back to council in 2 weeks' time for the council agenda. In that we have talked about an appointments panel that has place for a councillor to sit in. That's some of you will have identified you'd like to do that already. It'll be helpful ahead of the meeting for you to identify that so we can actually think about who sits there. The decision will be made at the meeting, but if you have an interest in that, let us know. The committee has also co-opted mana whenua to sit with them in the past, and so there will be an opportunity to think about that and the part that mana whenua play, particularly in the water decision, will be one of those co-opted members that will be discussed at the next meeting, and then these 3 papers will sit on that same agenda. So just expect to see these in your inbox again next week. Thank you, Tim, and thanks, Alex.
Quick question.
We now have the Delegation of Authority policy.
So I'll kick it off as the team are walking up to the table to talk to the detail. As councillors, you'll remember, last year we did a significant piece of work on resetting the financial delegations and seeking